Hey everyone, welcome to our second episode of our podcast, Shaman and the Scribe. My name is Ali Kaden. I'm an author of thriller and esoteric fiction, and I'm here with my good friend, Brendon.
Hey everyone, I'm Brendon. I am a shaman, a Reiki master, and a spiritual counselor. I'm looking forward to our second episode.
Me too. So this is episode number 2. What did people have to say about episode number 1?
So far, so good. I've gotten mostly positive feedback. How about you?
Yeah, I shared it with one friend who liked, two friends who actually liked it and said looking forward to the next one. So I'm excited to send this one to them and see if they like it too.
Great. Yeah, my brother and sister seemed really excited. It was their response kind of gave me the vibe that they're like happy I'm finally doing something like this.
Nice.
That was very encouraging. And then we have a mutual friend who enjoyed at least the first 11 minutes, she said.
The first 11 minutes, yeah.
Yeah.
That doesn't count because I think it was 40 minutes. So I'm gonna respectfully say you haven't watched it. Yeah.
We'll have to wait for the rest of her feedback.
Yeah. Well, we've been talking, we talked a little bit about what we were going to do in this episode, and we bounced some ideas around. But I think, whenever you and I are hanging out, we usually have some pretty wild conversations. And I think that was the true intention of the podcast. So while we'll have, a bunch of topics that we can weave in and out, I think you and I just talking the way we normally talk is probably the best feature of what we're doing here.
I think so. I mean, I would want to hang out with us. But so like usually when we're talking, like I feel like we'll go into a topic with the mind and like right to the edges of where the mind can take us. And then it's like, what do we do? And then that's where we kind of drop into the heart and sort of have an experience there as opposed to an experience of the mind.
Then that's the kind of thing that before I met you and met people, in certain circles that talk like that, I would have been pretty weirded out by the statement drop into the heart. Like, how do you drop into your heart? Because that sounds very hallmarky and not practical. At least it did to me. And what I found working with you and sort of going down this path is it's real. Like there is a very real thing that happens when you're able to not live in the mind and drop in the heart, as you say. So how would you describe it?
It might be difficult for some people to understand like what the heart is. Like, is it the beating organ in my chest? Like, why do I want to be there? It kind of sounds like sunshine and rainbows. I think it's, in this context, it's about the heart chakra, which is its location is in the center of the rib cage, like right in the middle, and it's definitely associated with the organ of the heart, but it's not that organ. It's an energetic center, and
it's not the left ventricle and right ventricle and all that stuff.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's probably a little more symmetrical and green than that. The heart chakra is typically associated with the color green.
And I know, I didn't think of it that way. I didn't think of it in terms of chakras. I thought of it in terms of the opposite of being in the mind. I think being in the mind is analytical, judgmental, and sort of removed from reality in a sense, because the more somebody thinks, the more their consciousness is focused in their head and less on what's in front of them. And so that's what living in the mind meant to me. And what I found is that when I was more present, when I wasn't thinking and judging and, delineating as much, and I was just focused on what was in front of me, whether it was a landscape or a person, but especially when it was with a person, I noticed that by looking at them and just taking in the experience, everything they have to say, all their movements, not in a creepy way, but just being present with somebody else instead of squirrely. Like I'm looking at somebody, they're looking at me, I gotta get out of this moment, and so that's what dropping into the heart, what I realized it meant for me was just be aware to what's around, the life that's around you, instead of judging it in your head all by yourself.
Okay, yeah. It is a definitely more expansive state of awareness in the heart. Like, it's also associated with the feeling of love, unconditional love. So you can see when you're looking into the eyes of someone, a being in front of you, human or otherwise, you can know that being as yourself. And that's what I think you're talking about there, is having a curiosity about the experience of another person that brings you into a state of love and awareness and presence, like free of judgment.
Yeah, and that's what you would call experiencing somebody else as yourself, because you're 100% attuned to what they're doing right in front of you in that moment.
Yeah, you can know that they're you. In many ways, you're looking into someone's eyes, and that being who's looking at you is the same being looking through your eyes.
And this is the true meaning of compassion, right? Is that we are all so interconnected, essentially one life, that there could be no violence, there could be no harm, because one cannot harm oneself, in a sense, or at least not do it rationally.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about the Sanskrit mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum. The meaning is the jewel is in the heart's lotus. It's like the jewel of the mind is in the lotus of the heart. And just thinking about, going back to what you said about how the mind is practical, and being centered in the heart is actually, there is a practical way to do it. Like chanting that mantra is it. And it's interesting that the effect of the mantra Om Mani Padme Hum energetically is it drops the third eye chakra into the heart.
So don't all mantras do that? I mean, aren't all chanting exercises or chanting practices meant to get people out of their mind and into a different part of their being, essentially?
Definitely, they are meant to free the person from their mind. Not all of them specifically drop the mind into the heart. That mantra does.
So what are some other examples of mantras? Like where else can be dropped into where else?
That's a good question. I don't know of any other mantras specifically that drop chakras into other ones. I'm thinking about the Gayatri mantra, though. In the beginning of the long form of the Gayatri mantra, where it goes Om Bhu, Om Bhuvaha, Om Swaha, Om Maha, Om Janaha, Om Tapaha, Om Satyam. So each time you say Om, the word after represents the chakras from the root to the crown. So that mantra, and then Om Tat Savitur Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dio Yonaha Prachodayat. Then, so you're opening all of the chakras, the 7 chakras, to the light and knowledge of the sun, and asking for it to illuminate you in every chakra. So that mantra brings energy, drops the energy of the sun into all of our chakras.
So would you say that chanting is the or getting out of the mind is the main reason somebody would chant?
Yes. Yeah. Mantra yoga is the yoga for people who are stuck in their mind.
Right. Yeah. My experience, I mean, I've been chanting, doing all the mantras that you've been giving me for about a year and a half. And my experience is I didn't realize how it would unfold, how the slowing down of my mind would unfold. I thought I was going to do a mantra and then something was going to crack open and I could, and then I was just serene and clear. And my experience was that doing the mantra, looping my mind around and around and around, with these different mantras, is that a space started to open up and I was able to observe my mind from a different perspective and realize just how busy it was. I mean,
Yeah.
like I saw it from a different perspective of like, oh wow, my mind is its own life form. It's doing its own thing all day, and it thinks a lot more about outcomes in the world than it has any power over. And it's going crazy. I understand why they call it the monkey mind. And every day of chanting seems to just kind of create a little bit more distance and a little bit more space and quiet that monkey down.
Yeah, as you were saying it, I'm remembering having conversations about this when we started. I'm just seeing someone who's so much more focused and at peace.
Yeah, maybe what, 6-7 months ago, I think I was like, Brendon, I realized that most of my personality is just complete nonsense.
Yeah.
And your response is, how long have you known?
And how long had you known?
I've always known. I've always known that I am not the mind, that these thoughts are not me, and that I'm the silent observer within. I had only digested that on an intellectual level, a little bit on a deeper level, because I had committed to meditation practices in the past, and I have had experiences, but it wasn't something that I just knew instinctively as, oh, this is absolute truth. But I think recently really committing to a spiritual practice. I mean, I haven't missed a day in over a year and a half, and I'm really proud of that. And
I'm very proud of you.
thank you. Yeah, and I see it from a completely different viewpoint now. And I'm glad that we got to do this work together, because I'm glad that I don't have to identify with the mind anymore. I don't, it's a choice, and like you said to me once, you could put it down, and that's what it feels like. It's like, oh, all these judgments and thoughts and, you know, projections of future, and ruminating on past, all of this is nonsense. And what's happening here in front of me, even if it's a boring day, is a lot better than just bouncing around all these nonsense ideas in my head. And I want to continue to lengthen that distance, to create more space, so that I have better control over the mind.
I think when some of us start the practice, there's like this villainizing of the mind that can happen. That probably doesn't help too much, and it does happen. And I think what we see though is as we chant over time and become more free of our minds, we do have moments where we're in it, and then we have these other moments where we're free, and that can feel like new in a very primal way, or sort of a familiar way. Like you can almost remember being a very small child and having a moment of stillness, like internal stillness, and that I feel like that's what's sort of expanding.
And that stillness is powerful. That's where your true power, I don't mean you, I mean, I do mean you, but I mean what one, a person in general, that's where their real power comes from, is from that stillness. And this might be a crude way of saying it or understanding it, but you're a Reiki master, and when you give Reiki, you do it not virtually, but sort of, you don't have to be touching the person. And there's countless times, I mean, over 100 times where I've sat in front of you and you've sent Reiki energy in my direction. And it's a very tangible thing that I can feel and experience, and it's repeatable. And in my mind, I equate that skill or power to, because Brendon knows how to turn off the mind. Would you say that that's the right way of looking at it?
Well, yes and no. I think that, well, first, anyone can send Reiki who's trained and attuned. And when Reiki comes through, like Reiki is the universal life force energy, right? It's chi. Ki is the Japanese word for chi, so life force. Rei means universe, universal life force energy. So that light is pure. Reiki light, universal light energy is pure life force, unadulterated, and it comes through practitioners. And I heard this recently from a teacher about Reiki, that each practitioner can be viewed as a crystal, and the light comes through the crystal and is filtered through the crystal of the practitioner. And the degree of clarity of that crystal has to do with how clear the energy and the mind of the practitioner is. The purity of the light has to do with the clarity of the practitioner. In shamanic practices, there's the image of the hollow bone. We want to be a hollow bone like a vessel for the light to pour through us.
Right.
I chant, I do about 3 hours a day of chanting apart from my work with clients, which usually involves a lot of chanting.
Yeah.
And I do that so that I can be a very hollow bone, a very clear crystal. And that's how I teach Reiki too. If you want to really let a lot of light come through, clear out. And the mantras clear the mind. They also clear the body. They open the meridians, the nadis, or the energy channels in the body.
Well, and you live simply in other ways too. You cultivate emptiness in other ways. You eat once a day, you live simply, you don't watch TV. Um, and that's a lot of energy saved. A lot of people spend a couple of hours just half pouring their attention into these devices. I mean, and to recapture all of that it seems like it's a lot of energy that you can add back to your life.
I haven't thought about it that way. Yeah, I've sort of I've seen TV as something I don't trust since I was a little kid. I'm sure there's a lot of energy saved from not focusing my attention on something like that. They say energy flows where attention goes.
So would you say people come to see you so that they can be empty? They can be hollow bones? Does everybody want that? Because when I listen to that, I'm like, I want that. I want complete ego death. Like that's where my mind goes. Yes, let's
Yeah,
let's do this. Let's dissolve into the all and get rid of the self. In an almost extreme kind of way. But not everybody who comes to see you thinks like that, right?
right. Yeah, you're a special case. You're one of a few special cases. I think that's where you and I connect. It's like, yeah, why wouldn't you want to annihilate the ego immediately and experience the one in everything? People are at different points on their path. Sometimes people come see me for a physical injury or a trauma. Usually the work that needs to be done is clearing though, whether they're aware of that or not. The work I do can take pain away very quickly.
Yeah, no, I've
And
experienced.
then if someone really wants to dive in too, like we can lay it on thick and dive in.
Well, there's nothing to lose. I mean, I remember as I was chanting more and my mind was clearing up a little, and reality itself seemed to take on a softer quality. Everything just seemed a little less physical and a little more soft. It's hard to put into words. But as that space was increased, I found myself looking at the things that my mind wanted to do, and some of the things that my mind wanted to do. I mean, obviously there's a lot of things that my mind does that are good, right? Like thinking and taxes and work. Like that's all good mind activity. But sometimes I'm not using my mind. My mind is using me. I'm just letting it, sort of like you left the lights on and but left the house with the lights on. That's sort of what it feels like. And when I started seeing more of what was playing in that state, I realized that a lot of it was worry and fantasy. So worrying about something that I'm afraid to lose, or I'm worrying about something that I'm afraid will happen. And usually these worries are loops, like I'll worry about the same thing in the same way, and it'll have to be drawn out, visualized in my mind in all, very similar ways, like the same movie playing. Or the fantasies, and the fantasies is imagining myself in some awesome future where I have all the things that I want and I am all the things that I want to be. And I realized at one point, I have to give these up, and not in like a dramatic way, but this is nonsense. Like these are just fabrications of my mind, and the mind, it analyzes things, it dissects things, and it also tries to protect us because life on Earth wasn't always, safe for people. There were animals, and we used to live in a very different sort of way, and our biology evolved to protect us. So, our mind is thinking about what could happen that's bad so that we can
Mhm.
preempt it. And it's also trying to imagine something better because we're anticipating, we want to escape pain and suffering into something better. But I don't need to worry about stuff or fantasize about stuff that is not practical, that is just completely out there, but not just out there. I'm not choosing to think about it, so from my perspective, ego death isn't so bad of a thing because what I'm giving up isn't that valuable, and then what you get is, I mean, how do you that's a whole separate podcast, where every episode could be filled with what you get when you do achieve stillness. It's so for me there's no comparison.
I'm with you there. There is really no comparison. Yeah, when you know how to touch stillness, you're sort of always at home within yourself, and no matter what the circumstances, you can be still and okay. With the breath. Breath is a great tool to tether the mind to and come back home to. If you're breathing, that's good. That's a good place to start from. And looking at the mind with that, I love the compassion that you look at your mind with. You can tell you're in your heart. You know, this is something that evolved from our ancient ancestors who needed to be very acutely aware of saber-toothed tiger attack, whatever other ferocious beasts might be, you know, after
Giant
their food
sloths.
supply. Yeah, giant sloths. I
I was just thinking about Sid the Sloth from Ice Age. That's my daughter's favorite character on the cartoon.
haven't seen that movie. Oh, we'll have to watch it with Layla next time I
Oh,
hang out with
it's
you
it's
guys.
the best one of all the kid cartoons. This is my favorite one, Ice Age. It's all these
All
ice.
right.
There's a woolly mammoth and a saber-toothed tiger and a giant sloth, and they go on adventures during the Ice Age. It's really cool.
Sold. I'm into it.
Yeah, so the mind, and then what you get when you get out of the mind, when you drop into the heart, and some of the things that I've experienced that I think that, it's good not to compare, but I think that I've found a relative sense of peace, in these practices. More peace than I had before, that's for sure. And more awareness of what I really want and who I really am. And one thing that used to frustrate me in life is people would say like, "Oh, you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. Why don't you put down that load? You don't have to carry it by yourself." And it's like, well, where is the load? How do I take it off? Like, I don't even know. Like, how do you? Sure, get it off me. You know.
Yeah.
And these practices and with your help, I sort of learned how to do that. All these things like all these fabrications of mind, like shame, that was a big one. It's like, oh, whose shame is this? I don't think this is mine. I don't need to hang on to this anymore. Like I'm actually okay with this, certain just a lot of beliefs that didn't make sense, that didn't serve my highest good or anyone's highest good, just to be able to put that down and be like, that's not entirely true. And another benefit or advantage of these types of practices is I'm a lot more comfortable with people. I'm a lot more comfortable looking at somebody and taking in what they're saying and doing and not being up in my mind about it because there's just so much power there because I'm, in that state, it's like, all right, whatever you do, I'm with you. I'm infinitely curious versus, the city mind, or it's like, what can I get and what are you doing and where do you live and how much did that cost? And, you're doing all these calculations on yourself and others try to satisfy some equation that doesn't even really matter or make sense.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing what happens when we just allow and sit in a space of acceptance and that curiosity that you're talking about.
I was listening to Daryl Anka, I think his name is, and he channels an entity called Bashar, who he says is a extraterrestrial or extra dimensional. And one thing that he says that I haven't really heard repeated a lot, that puts a lot of clarity to some of these metaphysical and esoteric, concepts or shamanic principles, is that from the universe's perspective or God's perspective, everything is happening at once. The past is happening right now. The future is happening right now. A different version of us is happening right now. Every possible iteration of creation is happening right now. And what we perceive in linear time to be the past is just all here and now. It's all one, and it's this energy of creation that's being emanated outwards that is creating past, present, and future. And so that's why tuning into the present is so powerful. It's not just that, right now is better than 2 seconds ago or 2 seconds from now. It's that there's a lot more happening now than we could possibly comprehend. And just by being a little bit more here in the now, we begin to pull at that thread and touch something that's not entirely physical, that's more, a spiritual dimension to life.
Yeah, and we can be more dynamic and responsive to the physical world when we're in the eternal now, like in deeply entrenched in this now moment. I remember growing up, my mom used to tell me, she used to get angry at me because I started meditating very young. And I've always been myself. And I remember she used to say, Brendon, you're too in the you live too much in the moment. Like you need to worry about the future sort of thing. And now I found a way to use that skill. And it seems that in every stage of life, no matter where we are, I think especially in a difficult, when we're faced with challenging situations or catalysts for growth, like being dynamically present in the moment is the most powerful place to be in a state of compassion, emanating compassion from within for the self and for other selves.
I think society in, the past 100 years, we were very concerned with progress and jobs and salaries and positions and GPAs and SAT scores. And we put so much importance on that stuff that we stopped honoring what it means to be a human being. And, I was taught the same thing, like, don't follow your passion, do something practical and smart. And I think that's terrible advice. I think that telling somebody to not live in the heart and make a decision based on fear in the mind is a terrible way to live one's life. And I'm not saying, reality doesn't matter. Like, people need to have jobs and make money and buy food, but they don't have to sacrifice their passion and what's inside them that wants to be expressed. And with my daughter, that's going to be the number one rule is follow your passion. I don't care if you're a neuroscientist at Harvard, or if you're just really into frogs and you have the world's biggest frog collection or whatever, as long as you're loving your life, that's the greatest success you'll have within yourself. But I think also in the world, good things happen when we honor what's happening here and now within ourselves as well.
Absolutely. I think, yeah, I see that, even, and I'm just kind of running like lots of situations in my head, and it always benefits to be present in the moment. We can, if we're tuned into our own heart, we can hear the messages from our intuition, from our third eye, from the universe. And intuition is, we continue to find, is never wrong. And being in that dynamic state, we do have to surrender sort of some of our plans,
Right.
So that we can live within that flow state,
right,
in this ever-changing universe, and show up as we're meant to show up, as our unique crystalline self.
Why is it set up this way? Like, why don't more people know about this? Why isn't it 101 of being a human? Like, you're born, they give you a towel and and a piece of paper that says, you are not the mind. If you go within, and you'll tap into something that's much more powerful than you can imagine. How does that get lost?
Well, there are clues. The universe has left breadcrumbs for us. I was raised in a Catholic home. Like, we went to church on Sundays and we did Sunday school and stuff. It wasn't a very big discussion at home. And thinking about growing up and like seeing the Catholic imagery, like beautiful stained glass windows, I don't ever remember feeling very moved by what any priest said in a church. And on the windows, and in the paintings, there was always some expression of love.
Right.
Love was being expressed in some way by Jesus or his mother, or the essence of what was trying to be taught was there, hidden under sort of a pile of bureaucracy and hierarchy in a church.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I mean, I grew up Muslim, and I am Muslim. I don't believe in having to change that. And the word Muslim means one who has surrendered. So
I didn't know that.
yeah, and so the word
Okay.
itself is a lot more powerful in its true meaning, which is not an adherent of the faith. It's not an affiliation. It's a state of being, one who has surrendered. What are you surrendering to? Well, God, the universe, and where is that happening? Well, it's not in your head. It's not in some past thought or future thought in your mind. It's here and now. And it's so simple. And I think all the world religions, some of them talk about this all the time, but some people, I think, can get caught up in dogmatic right and wrong, heaven and hell stuff, and miss out the higher meaning in some of these traditions and what they were trying to teach, which is that there is an inner state to access, that there is a very real thing that happens within, and there's a very practical way to achieve it with spiritual practices. And it's odd to me that that isn't the first thing we're taught by our families, by our schools, by the world. You know, like this is it wasn't meant to be digested as an intellectual concept. We're not all supposed to have PhDs in theology and pick the right religion. You know, that's complete.
Right.
It's completely irrelevant because somebody on a desert island, or you know, with no people around and no religion and no books, can still access this, had a teacher, or if they knew how, or if they were just lucky enough to be born with that skill.
Yeah, you can see it being immersed in nature for after not too long, like sitting by the beach. Mother Nature can soothe the mind and help bring us into our natural stillness. Like it's our natural state. I think that's why when someone starts and they have an experience with the energy, like they want nothing else. Their soul can want nothing else after. I get to see that almost every day. People going for that experience of the light, of the love of their creator again and again. And I am aware that it is a huge part of why we took on bodies and they're here.
I'm an author, so I also think of it from a drama or suspense perspective of, you know, I agree with you that this is the best, you know, the best kept secret, you know, hidden in plain sight, but it has been kept a secret, or at least, you know, either people didn't know or they knew and they thought the world would be better if the masses didn't know. And as an author writing fiction, I mean, I do love to write about this stuff in nonfiction as well, but in fiction, I want the bad guys in the story to be people who suppress this information. You know, like the people who knew all along for thousands of years, and they've maintained this lie that, you know, oh yeah, religion is about affiliation. You know, you're supposed to pick the right thing, and you're right and they're wrong, and it's a polarizing ideology. Follow that and follow us, you know, versus, hey, this truth is accessible, and if everybody had access to it, governments and business would probably look very, very different, because people would have a much more communal mindset. And I don't mean communist, but I just mean empathetic. You know, they would have a much more empathetic mindset with regard to the planet, with each other, with just how we go about living our lives.
I agree. If only we all saw ourselves in the other and the other in ourselves.
Yeah, maybe we'll you know, we were joking, like, what do you want to have the podcast be about? And I said religion and politics. So maybe we can talk about that in the next episode a little bit, you know, just how does this apply? You know, how does this not living in the mind thing apply to analyzing the actual world that we're living in? You know, how do we apply this empathetic approach and mindset to looking at the world around us and making sense of it right now, especially right now?
That's a great idea. Let's do it for the next episode.
All right, we'll do it for the next episode. Do you have any closing notes?
I'm just really grateful to you for helping make this happen. All the technology stuff that you did to make it happen.
I didn't do anything. I just pressed a button.
It's magic to me. And also to anyone who's listening, I'm so grateful. And I'm sending you and all of them many blessings.
Thank you. I'll get this episode edited and put up, and I'll see you on the next one.
All right, I'll see you then.
Bye.
Bye, dude.